right here. This glass of water, maybe it weighs, I don't know, a pound-ish. John is going, no, well, I will have you know, this morning I weighed a glass of water, and it weighed a pound. I don't know. I did it for the purposes of this. Maybe my glasses are heavier at home, I don't know. Let's pretend it's a pound. It's just a glass of water, right? If someone asked me to hold this glass of water for a minute, of course, I would. No problem. If someone asked me to hold it for 10 minutes, you know, sure. Okay, I'm holding it for 10 minutes. My arm's getting a little tired, but I can handle it. They asked me to hold it for 10 hours. My arm would be numb, right? My whole focus would be on the glass of water. That's only a pound. We agreed. It's only a pound, but it would feel much heavier. If they asked me to hold this glass of water for 10 months, I wouldn't be able to stand anymore, right? What if they asked me to hold this glass of water for 10 years? The weight of the glass didn't change, but it became incredibly heavy, and all-consuming in my life. And my entire life would be revolving around this glass of water and managing to hold it, to carry it with me wherever I went. Yes? Now, many of us are asked to hold something. Pain, perhaps. Maybe the glass was filled with discontentment or shame or anger or generational wounds. But we held it. We held it until we couldn't hold it anymore. And maybe we put the glass down and we walk away. We finally get to the place of like, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna put that glass down. It is too heavy for me to carry anymore. But what happens often, much like, say, an amputee experiences a limb that is no longer there, we might unconsciously go back and just pick it up because it's what we've known for 10 months or 10 years. And then it's about putting it back down again and walking away and letting it be. And that is the nature of being human. It's the nature of letting go of burdens that we no longer want to carry. And these burdens, this pain in this glass, looks different for every human being, right? Every person, depending on whatever your experience was growing up, whatever it may be, it looks different for everyone. But when we finally put it down, we become lighter. Yes. Lighter is the name of the book that we are going to be working from. We're doing a book series for the next 3 weeks. I'm so excited to bring this book to you. Practitioner Shelley is going to support this book series, and Rev Sarah Forbes, we get to call her Rev now. Hi, Rev Sarah. This book is called Lighter. Let go of the past, connect with the present, expand the future. This is a New York Times bestseller, and it's a book that is layered. It's a book that has all kinds of reflections and thoughts and journal prompts at the end of each section. It's written for the beginner, and it's written for the most advanced minister, Rev Sally, like yourself. It's for all of us. It's very clear, it's very simple, and it's beautiful. Diego Perez came to this country with his family when he was just 4 years old from Ecuador. He writes about how difficult it was for his family. They lived in abject poverty and experienced just the intense pressure of making it week to week, often not knowing if they would have enough food to eat or be able to pay their rent. His mother, father, younger sister, and brother all lived in a very small two-bedroom apartment. And when he was in high school, he became an activist for social change. He saw the need firsthand, and he was just dedicated to helping make the world a better place for all people. And at a very young age, because he saw the injustice and the inequities that his community experienced, he dedicated his life to this work. He was acutely aware of the sacrifices that his parents made to come to the United States, to give him and his siblings a better life. However, despite wanting very much to help others, the pressure of poverty was excruciating for him. Wanting to escape the pain of his daily life, by the time he was in his early 20s, he fell into a very, very serious addiction to drugs and alcohol, and it nearly killed him. His journey back from that experience and the trauma of his childhood and the way that he triumphed is deeply moving. He discovered Buddhist teachings and the form of meditation I like to teach, which is Vipassana. And it was there that his healing began. His pen name is Young Pueblo, which means young people. He writes, "This pseudonym reflects a social commentary that points to humanity's coming growth and maturation. The name signals a time when we will collectively transition from being ruled by short-sightedness and self-centeredness to having an elevated appreciation of our interconnectedness, which normalizes treating each other with new and considerate gentleness." He continues, "Not only, all people do not need to be perfectly healed for us to live in a peaceful world. But as more and more people progress in their healing, this will not only create waves that change the trajectory of human history, it will perhaps save the planet. This book," he writes, lighter, "is meant as a bridge between the ideas of personal transformation and global transformation to show that the two are deeply intertwined and function to support each other." If there wasn't a book that was made for our community, I don't know what is. We have copies downstairs in our bookstore. Yes, Carolyn, and they're also available in our online store. So Young Pueblo explains that in order to get to a place of letting go of the things in the past that either hurt us or no longer serve us, we must first get to a place of true self-love. So what does that even mean, really? You know, over the years, so many very well-meaning folks in the sort of self-help spaces have in some ways unconsciously hijacked what self-love really is. I think especially in the 90s and 2000s, it became a very sort of egocentric, toxic positivity thing with self-love. It was very egocentric, and it really complicated this very spiritual practice that I'm here to bring to you today. Because toxic positivity and egoic thinking around self-love are the farthest thing from the spiritual ancient practice of self-love. Self-love is ordained by God, Spirit, Source, whatever word works for you. I love the analogy that Young Pueblo gives. He explains that anything that is powerful and long-lasting requires a sturdy foundation. If you think about it, when a home is being built, attention first goes to the foundation. It's the most important thing. You can't successfully build a house if the foundation is not solid and secure. And once that foundation is firmly in place, then you can go and you can build and you can expand and you can create something magnificent. He writes, the evolution of the individual works in a similar manner. Self-love is the first step that all inner and outer success is built on. Setting down that glass that is filled with whatever it is filled with for you, that is an act of self-love. It is not for anyone. It is an act of self-love. It is living your spiritual truth. In New Thought, in our teaching, we understand the power of our thoughts. We talk about that a lot around here. We understand the power of our mind is an incredible gift given to us by the divine that we are here to experience. And. There's a wonderful saying that's said a lot in our tradition, and many people are quoted as being the first to say it. It goes way, way back, sort of to the turn of the century is when it first started showing up, and it's this idea of mind your mind. And there's been all kinds of variations of that over the decades. Mind your mind. Setting that glass of pain down requires that we change our mind about the false belief that we need to carry it anymore. Self-love teaches us that we don't need to carry anything but the truth of God, the indwelling Spirit within us. The fact is, so much of the glasses of pain or discomfort, negative self-talk, whatever it may be for you that we still carry within us, have absolutely nothing to do with us. A lot of the time, the glass or glasses that we are unconsciously carrying around is the same glass filled with the pain of the unhealed wounds of the generations that came before us. It was their glass. And they said, here, this is really heavy for me, you take it. Unconsciously, often well-meaning people unconsciously handed that glass to us when we were younger. And we didn't know better then, but we do now. We do now. We didn't realize then that it wasn't ours to carry. Quick caveat. Let me start by saying, this is part of being human, my friends. This is part of the experience of living in this world of matter. This isn't about blame at all, not even a little bit. I know every single one of you listening to my voice who happens to be a parent or a grandparent is thinking to themselves or has thought to themselves, dear God, what glass of pain did I pass on to my kiddo? And that is key, because that's where, as Ernest Holmes says, awareness is curative. That's where we get to be incredibly compassionate and kind and loving to ourselves and say, okay, all right, maybe it was that, but I get to stop that pattern in this lifetime. I get to generationally heal this. Are you with me? Self-love is about generational healing. It's about generational healing, because I don't know anyone here who isn't human. And so this requires that we be so gentle with ourselves as we make the unconscious conscious. And where it works, where it's possible, this then will lead to healing, courageous conversations. with our beloveds. But first, we need to do some self-inquiry. So let me ask you, is there anything that you, my loves, are still carrying around that someone or society gave you to carry? And it may be that in your realization of this, you might be saying, yes, but I'm not ready to put it down because it's become a part of me. It's attached to me now. It does feel like a limb. I'm not quite ready to put it down yet, Rev Shannon. That's fine. If you're in that place, the question that I have for you is, okay, but are you willing? Are you willing to consider putting it down? Because if you're willing to consider putting it down, the great news is that at some point you will put it down. And maybe you're sitting here right now, or maybe you're listening to me and you're going, no, I'm going to not only put it down, I'm going to throw it down. That's great too. That's great too. Either way, what I want you to know is you're in the right, safe, nurturing place. Because here's the deal. There is nothing spiritual about suffering. There is nothing whatsoever of God that is connected to suffering. That was an old idea presented by powerful men who wanted to control the ancient world, and sadly they used religion to do so, and it is still happening today. Not here. Not a new thought teaching. It's a new thought we're having about the ancient wisdom that came before the corruption of the teachings that were holy and sacred. Do you hear me? So in truth, nothing in the teachings of Jesus, or certainly the wisdom teachings that came before him in Hinduism and Buddhism, nowhere does it say that suffering and pain is necessary for your spiritual liberation. That is a lie. Yeah. It's actually the opposite. It's the complete opposite. Take Buddhism, for example. That whole philosophy, the beautiful philosophy of Buddhism, rests on the solid foundation that life, yes, in life, of course, there is pain in life, but in no way is that meant to rule our life. In fact, the Buddha himself, in his own personal journey, learned that living in pain was no way to live. And it stopped us from our enlightenment. The Buddha taught that pain was not ours to hold or carry. Pain is inevitable. It's an inevitable part of life, but suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The Buddha taught that we can, with great compassion, be with whatever may be painful in front of us, but not to grasp or cling or hold onto it. He taught that our path to liberation from suffering was to refuse to pick up the glass in the first place, to acknowledge it, to see it, but to never pick it up, and to certainly not carry it. In Christianity, in Romans in 12:15, it says, we are to weep with those who weep. This is the teaching of compassion. We are to weep with those who weep. Nowhere does it say we are to take over the weeping. Right? How many of us have taken over the weeping of generations before us? It also says in Romans 12:15, we are to rejoice with those who are rejoicing. This is the idea. This is the wholeness of that idea. It is a far cry from carrying and mindlessly passing around our pain. This book, Lighter, is about healing our minds and how that ripples out into everything. Young Pueblo teaches that healing is when you intentionally decrease the tension you carry in your mind. Right? Healing is when you intentionally decrease the tension you carry in your mind. So how do we do that? I love what he writes about this idea. He says, self-love is not only a mindset, but a set of actions. Taken to its highest form, self-love is an energy we use to evolve. Self-love is not only a mindset, but a set of actions. Taken to its highest form, self-love is an energy we use to evolve. So loving ourselves is foundational. Think of that house. It is foundational to our own evolution and that which we are here to build and create and make magnificent. So, for example, when we consciously sever any unhealthy family patterns in this lifetime by setting down that glass of whatever pain is in it, the house that we build becomes stronger and healthier and more glorious for other generations to come live in it. Are you with me? In any given situation, we have an opportunity to not get sucked into drama around us. This can keep us from putting the glass down. You know, there is so much right now, so much energy in the pain body of humanity that is swirling around, so much negativity, conspiracy, all of that energy that is swirling around that can make this process that much more challenging, let's say, if we're not mindful, if we're not incredibly mindful. Pueblo writes, healing is not about perfection. It is about no longer living unconsciously. He goes on, healing is about illuminating your mind with your own awareness, turning on the light within so brightly that your old patterns no longer have anywhere to hide. That takes courage. That takes courage. Being on a spiritual path is one thing, my friends. Living a spiritual life, I have learned, is another. Living a spiritual life is about embracing and embodying this path and this way of being in the world. The way to live a spiritually aligned life is to recognize that we are always making the unconscious conscious. And in doing so, we're able to fully embody this ancient wisdom that we come from. So how do we do this? One way, I just mentioned, it's this idea of recognizing that there is so much going on in the world, but not getting sucked into it. I talked about this in my intuition workshop last week. It's this idea of observing rather than absorbing. Because again, there's a lot happening right now in this lifetime for this group of collective souls. And all of us are empathic. There isn't any one of us that doesn't feel it to some degree, some more than others, but we're all empathic. We are all feelers. And so what happens is it's so easy to get caught up in that swirl of energy and unconsciously take it on or pick up the glass. Not even when we were younger, but now. I see a lot of people picking up the glass now. And what can happen, you know, it's sort of this illusion if we're not mindful, that can kind of take over. It can make us feel tired when we've picked up on someone else's pain. It can make us feel depleted or angsty without even knowing why. And so with all of this going on, how can we be in a place of healing and self-love? This is where Jesus of Nazareth reminds us to be in the world but not of it. To be in the world but not of it. This is a grounding practice that can really serve and support us in the healing and revealing of our mind. Again, just notice when you find yourself taking over the weeping. It's about balance, my friends. It's about balance. Now, obviously, there will be times when someone does something that triggers legitimate anger within us. And right now, we have good reason to have righteous anger for many things that are happening in this country right now. That is a good thing. That inspires us to move our feet, to do the work. That's a good thing. But many times, that is not necessarily the case. Young writes, whenever anger or another heavy emotion appears in the theater of your mind, it will start looking for more fuel, even if it has to bend logic to do so. Have you ever had like a complete and total argument with someone else in your mind? Anybody? and it feels so real, doesn't it? You can like feel it in your body. Science has taught us that our body, our minds don't know the difference, right? And you feel it. You feel it in your mind. It's like something little irritates us, and then all of a sudden we have this whole thing happening in our minds, and our body is reacting. It's hilarious that we humans do that. The next time you do that, I invite you to stop and allow yourself to laugh at the soap opera you have just created in your brain. If you can just stop that, if you can just literally, that's what I do. I'm like, what am I doing? What is happening? This is bananas. And then we're able to snap out of that weird, self-imposed tragedy play that, somehow we're always the hero, right? So what happened there? Our imagination happened there, and our ego hijacked our imagination. That's what happened there. That's all. That's all. And then we just let it run wild. We let it run wild. I invite you to use a little tool if this helps you. If you haven't already, and maybe some of you I've taught this before, I invite you to give your ego a name. Give your ego a name. Whatever the name is, whatever it works for you, if you can give your ego a name, you can say to it, I'm just going to say, I don't know, give me a name, somebody, anything. Charlotte? Charlie. All right, Charlie, you are really outperforming yourself in this one. It immediately stops it. It immediately stops it. So I invite you into that this week. We're all going to be walking around going, Charlie, enough, Charlie. We'll be in a meeting here, and someone will be saying something, and they'll go, uh-oh, Charlie's showing up. Our imagination happened, and our ego took over. We see this in conspiracy theory, don't we? With all the conspiracies that are happening, we see this. The other remedy that I want to suggest for you that really, for me, was the game changer in this journey for myself, and that is meditation. If you have not yet started meditating, start with guided meditation, a few minutes a day. If you are a meditator, I invite you to extend your time if you can. This is the antidote to that ego voice, because you spot it in your body before it even shows up. That is what it is to live this spiritual teaching as opposed to being on a spiritual path. You get to a point in this work where you notice it ahead of time. Sometimes, as humans, you're just going to go down that rabbit hole. But you can head it off at the pass much easier, much, much easier. So, my loves, this week, I invite you to notice what glass or glasses you may be carrying, and consider or be willing to put them down. Know that there is help if you need support in doing that. We have practitioners, highly skilled practitioners here, or see a therapist or a trusted friend if it's a big thing. But I invite you to really make that conscious and notice if you're carrying it. The second thing, I invite you to observe, but don't absorb. Practice compassion for others without taking it on. And notice when you're taking it on, if you could just stop and take a breath. Observe, but don't absorb. And finally, mind your mind. Watch that imagination of yours. Put it to good use, rather than anything that does not serve you and your spiritual growth. Consider meditating or extending your time in meditation and watch Charlie go away.